Good morning, everyone, and welcome, one and all. We welcome our Unitarian Universalist Church of Sarasota and our Lakewood Ranch Unitarian Universalists, as well as our visitors, whether you are on campus today or viewing us on live stream. We do offer a special welcome to our visitors. We hope that while you are here checking us out or at home, that you will go to our homepage and click on the banner entitled Welcome Visitors. When you do that, it'll take you to a page that tells you a lot about this congregation. It'll also give you the opportunity to sign our virtual guest book. If you do that, we will send you our newsletter and also the links to our various online meetings during the week. So I hope that you'll take just a moment to check us out. We look forward to having a coffee hour in person here outside in the courtyard after the service, and we hope all of you will join us. The Unitarian Universalist Church of Sarasota Arts Council is happy to present the 2021 Members Art Exhibit. This virtual exhibit is a chance for UUCS member artists to connect with our Unitarian Universalist community through art. It features 32 works by 19 Unitarian Universalist Church of Sarasota artists. You can see this exhibit online by clicking on the link in our newsletter, the contact, or you can also find the link on our church's website by going to Our Church in the top menu and then clicking on the Arts Council link. The Arts Council thanks every artist for their contribution, and they're pleased to share this talent among you all. We have a couple of special guests that are part of the service today, and we want to take just a moment to welcome them and remind you who they are. We have our guest musician, Ann Alton, who is one of our favorite and most distinguished musicians. She has taught cello at the Juilliard School of Music for more than 20 years and has many students over the years that you would know. She herself attended Juilliard on a full scholarship, and her mother taught at Juilliard for many years as well. She is, of course, a vibrant person, and we are so happy to have her back. Also, we have with us today, virtually, Keith Kron. Keith is the director of the Transition Office for the Unitarian Universalist Association, which is the organization that we're dealing with, the office we're dealing with a lot this year as we are in the midst of the ministerial search. Before that, for over 14 years, he was the director of the Office of Bisexual, Gay, Lesbian, and Transgender Concerns for the Unitarian Universalist Association from 1996 to 2010. Between those two jobs, he has visited over 450 Unitarian Universalist congregations, from Fairbanks, Alaska to Fort Lauderdale, from Honolulu to Newfoundland. And he also reviewed and updated our welcoming congregation curriculum and wrote the book, literally, on In the Interim, which is a collection of essays about the interim time and transition. He is a big lover of children's literature, and we will be happy to have him also, in addition to presenting our sermon, also present our Time for All Ages. Finally, I'd like to invite our Associate Minister, Reverend Beth Miller, to come up and give us some other announcements. Welcome, Beth.
All right, Catherine's joining me for this. Well, welcome back, everybody. It's good to see you. You know, now that we're beginning to be in person again, we need lots of help. We need people to come back to volunteering. And I'm going to be in the courtyard after the service to take your sign-ups on a bunch of sheets. We've got several things going on. Catherine, what's this you've got with you?
Well, this is what you can do in the nursery. Of course, there's a few things that might also happen during that time period, but I do need help in the nursery rocking babies, as well as help during my religious education classes, reining in all of that energy towards our UU values.
And you know those people who welcome you when you're newcomer, and tell you about the church and make sure that you kind of get connected. We need help at that table too. It's the welcoming table, staffed by the membership committee. We need help there. We could use more ushers. What else have we got on our list?
Hospitality.
Hospitality.
Everybody likes to drink coffee, right? And
Right.
Janice, you need help with hospitality. And I know she's a little young yet, but she's into technology, and I'm sure some of you are too. We need technology help. So anybody who is a little bit comfortable with computers, we would love to have you come join us.
Right, we've got several things to do on that front. So anyway, come see me, and I'll answer any questions you have. We'll take down your name and contact information. The person in charge of that thing will get in touch with you, and it's not a commitment. At this point, it's an inquiry for, I think I might be interested, and we don't pressure you into doing things. We give you the opportunity to do things and to serve your congregation here.
And
So
it's not
come
a
see
life
me.
sentence. It's not a life sentence.
Not a life sentence. Although it
One
was.
Sunday a month would go a long way
That's
to making
right.
sure everything works out smoothly for
Yeah,
everybody.
right.
So we appreciate it.
So thanks for being here. I hope a lot of you will come chat with me.
Thank you so much. And so now we invite you to settle in for a shared time together, whether you're here or at home, as together we enjoy our prelude. that the moral arc of the universe does indeed bend toward justice. So it is Sunday morning, the day when we gather. Let us be thankful and full of praise to be in the company of those who came before us and yet ever in our midst. We light this chalice in the spirit of the first principle, affirming and promoting the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
Good morning. This is Penelope Rex. And Penelope Rex was nervous. It's not every day a little T-Rex starts school. What are my classmates going to be like? Will they be nice? How many teeth will they have? This was very important to Penelope. Penelope's mom bought her a new backpack with ponies on it. Ponies were Penelope's favorite because ponies are delicious. Penelope's dad packed her a lunch of 300 tuna sandwiches and 1 box of apple juice. Finally, the big day came, and Penelope Rex was very surprised to find out that all of her classmates were children. So she ate them because children are delicious. Penelope Rex, said Mrs. Noodleman, we don't eat our classmates. Please spit them out at once. So she did. It was not the best way to start school. Still, Penelope was determined to have a very good first day. She tried to make friends at recess, but standing at the bottom of the slide with her mouth open didn't help. She finger painted some of her best work, but her best work was of eating a child. She even saved a seat for Griffin Emery for lunch. You can sit here next to me, she said. He didn't. Penelope started to notice that everyone was making friends but her, and it was lonely. When she got home, her dad asked about her first day of school. Penelope cried, "The children wanted to play with me." "Penelope Rex," her father asked, "did you eat your classmates?" "Well, maybe just a little bit," she said. "Sometimes it's hard to make friends," said her dad, "especially if you eat them. You see, Penelope, children are just the same as us on the inside, only tastier." And this gave Penelope a lot to think about. The next day, Penelope tried really hard at school, But poor Penelope. She couldn't stop herself from eating her classmates. Mrs. Noodleman, Penelope ate William Amoto again. And all the students were afraid of her. Except for Walter. Walter was the goldfish. So Penelope tried to make friends with him. "Will you be my friend?" she asked as she stuck her finger into the fishbowl. And Walter looked at her finger and he went chomp right on her finger. "Eee!" cried Penelope. "He's eating my finger!" "Wah!" she cried. But once Penelope found out what it was like to be someone's snack, she lost her appetite for children. She stopped eating her classmates, even when Cece Woodman spilled barbecue sauce all over herself. And soon, Penelope began making friends. They played hide and seek. She made brownies. "You want brownie? I helped make them," she said. And now, even when children look especially delicious, she peeks at Walter and remembers what it's like when someone tries to eat you. And Walter the goldfish stares back and he licks his lips. Because dinosaurs are delicious. That's We Don't Eat Our Classmates by Ryan Higgins.
Thank you, Keith. We will have more from him soon, but for now, I invite us to rise in all the ways that we do as we join together in hymn number 159, "This Is My Song."
We will now enter into our centering time with this personal reflection entitled Unclenching. It was nearly a perfect day for a walk. I wasn't alone. My favorite sighting on my street in Providence was a woman walking her adorable French bulldog down the street. I heard her say, "Good boy, Luke," several times as she pulled slightly on the leash to keep Luke from being too distracted. Around the corner comes a man with a pit bull, and Luke immediately goes stock still. But the pit bull is wagging her tail with the greatest of hope and charm, clearly excited about the possibility of a new friend. And she had already won me over. The woman tries to get Luke to move forward, but it's in vain, as he is playing statue. Eventually, the man with a pit bull reaches the woman and her dog. If possible, Luke gets even stiffer. The woman is trying to tell him that it's okay, and the pit bull is sniffing inquisitively and hopefully at her new wished-for friend. And then, in an instant, Luke relaxes and sniffs back. And quickly their tails are all a-wagging as they sniff and nuzzle and snort. And I notice that the owners have relaxed, that they have unclenched, and they are now talking amiably, though near as I can tell, their tails are not a-wagging with the same veracity as their pets. It's only then that I realize that I had been clenching and I feel my own body relax. I left the happy foursome and headed off, thinking how much of a metaphor this was for today's times. How we all seem to be living lives of trepidation, and yet hope and kindness are out there if we look beyond the stereotypes, if we present ourselves with kindness, if we just try. I think about the reputations pit bulls have, and yet she was the kindest of all. Maybe in these trying and difficult times, we need to be a little bit more like the pit bull in whatever ways we can, offering hope and kindness to those new friends we might make.
May we continue in our centering with a few moments of quiet and then sing together, remaining seated, Spirited Life.
Our reading this morning comes from the author Emily Bernard, who wrote the book Black is the Body. Emily is a woman who, while working on her doctorate at Yale University back in 1993, found herself one evening in a coffee shop. And a man with mental health issues walked into the coffee shop and began stabbing people, including Emily. In her book, she talks about the harm that happened to her on that night. This is what she writes. I did experience terrible pain on the night of August the 7th. The person responsible for it was the surgeon on call. I lay on a gurney feeling helpless and afraid. The surgeon walked over to me and without saying a word or even looking in my direction, plunged his fingers into my gaping knife wound. I gasped and I instinctively grabbed his hand. It was only then that the man looked at me and said icily, "Don't touch my hand." His eyes were Aryan blue and as cold as his voice. I asked questions about what happened, and he refused to respond. Only the attending nurses treated me with any kindness or respect. Whenever I tell the story of the night I got stabbed, I always say that the person who did the most injury to me, who left the deepest wounds, was not Daniel Silva, the man with mental health issues who stabbed me, but it was the surgeon.
As we move into our time of giving and receiving the offering, we remember all the ways that it is how we give and receive all of our gifts that makes all the difference in this world. We remind you that we will both have the opportunity to give to support the ongoing work of this congregation here, but also whether you're here or at home, you can follow the link underneath the YouTube page that will take you to a way to very easily use your phone to give. Either way, may we remember how essential that spirit of generosity is to all that we do. May the offering now be given and received in love.
Thank you for that gift. With the trials in Kenosha and Brunswick, Georgia of Ahmaud Arbery happening this week, with last week being the National Transgender Day of Remembrance, I've been thinking a lot about violence and harm. I can't help but think about violence and religion, and it was just 3 years ago that a man walked into the synagogue, into Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, and opened fire. And I also think about another kind of violence in Pittsburgh, where it became revealed just before that about the sex scandal of the sexual abuse by priests in the Catholic Church. And there are times when I wonder, why does anyone trust religion at all? But then I think of our own Unitarian Universalist minister and popular author Robert Fulghum, who talks about this. He says, to be human is to be religious. To be religious is to be mindful. To be mindful is to pay attention. And to pay attention is to sanctify existence. And that we all have these religious moments, these very human moments. And I think about the possibility for harm in our own Unitarian Universalist congregations, and I was struck over the last 3 times that I have trained people, ministers new to interim ministry, I have asked them to list, what does a congregation need from its minister? They said what you would expect them to say. They need good preaching, they need pastoral care, they need someone who can do staff supervision, they need someone who will speak out in the wider world. But I was also intrigued by what none of the ministers said. No minister ever said, we need a minister who will do no harm. We need a minister with whom we can build trust. But what's interesting, I've never seen a congregation ask for that from a minister in the last 12 years of directing the Office of Transitions in their ministerial search process. Perhaps we assume these building blocks are just basic and given, but I think we need to talk about them. And I think we are at a moment where we need to build and rebuild trust in religion. How do we show up for ourselves and for the world? And I go back some 23 years when I was asked, as part of a denominational presence, to show up following the death of Matthew Shepard. I went to Laramie, Wyoming, to be with the congregation, to help the congregation try and figure out how to deal with the harm and violence that had happened to this young man who had been tied to a fence. The minister of the congregation at the time had asked me to come, had asked me if I would say a few words to help them think about this and that we might get the fence. So I showed up that morning prepared to say words, though at moments like this, words are inadequate. The minister reads a letter that he has gotten from someone, turns to me, and then says, and now Reverend Kron will deliver the sermon this morning. I hadn't realized I was supposed to give a sermon. I have no idea what I said. I do remember it was just important to be there and to show up. After the service and after talking with people, a smaller group from the church decided to go and visit the fence where Matthew Shepard had been tied up. We stopped at the grocery store, picked up some flowers to lay at the fence. There were many flowers that had already been laid there. The minister at the fence took a moment to lay the flowers down by the fence, turned to me and said, and now, Reverend Kron, will deliver the memorial service for Matthew Shepard. I did not deliver a memorial service. I said a few words which I hope for comfort and a wish for an end to the harm and violence that had happened there in Laramie, Wyoming. Afterwards, when I finally had a chance to talk to the minister, to circle back and clarify what the expectations were, he said, "I am a brand new minister. I have no idea what to do in moments like this." And that I understood, that I could comprehend. Because often in life we are faced in moments where we don't know what to do, where the magnitude of what has happened is so great that we are unsure of what is next. And yet it is just simply important to be there with each other. What I remember at the interfaith service for Matthew that had happened the day before, there were only 2 religious denominations that actually showed up. We were one of them. It is important to show up for each other. And it just so happened that a few months later, I had been scheduled to visit our congregation outside of Denver, Columbine, UU congregation. I was the first visiting minister there just 3 weeks after the high school shooting. And I walked into the sanctuary and I saw the power of Unitarian Universalism, because on the walls of the sanctuary of this small congregation were pictures sent by children from our religious education programs, offering support and kindness and hope to the people of this particular congregation, saying, "We are thinking of you. We are holding you. We know this is hard." Perhaps the best response to violent harm is that we simply show up for one another. Perhaps that is how we build trust. Brené Brown, the researcher, talks about how trust is built in the little moments, something like sending a card, sending a picture. And it made me think, if trust is built in the little moments, it can also be broken in little moments. I think back to when I was in seminary. I was in a class on death and dying, and heard the professor talk with the dean of our students, and the dean reminded her, violence happens not just in big things, but it happens in little things as well. And the professor, Anna, who was a Holocaust survivor and who worked with people who tried to commit suicide, looked at me and smiled. And she told the dean this story of what had happened in our class just the week before. We had been practicing being a chaplain for a hospital patient who was in great pain, great agony, unable to move, unable to do almost anything for himself. She had one of the students be the patient, and then had a student volunteer to be the chaplain. The first student volunteered. He went over, sat down next to her, and he took the patient's hand. At which point Anna stood up and said loudly, "Don't ever do that again." And we all turned and looked at her as she said this, trying to figure it out. And she went on. She said, "I want you to think about this patient. He literally has no control over his life at this moment. And you reinforce that by taking this patient's hand without asking if you could do that first. You could have asked him to blink his eyes once or twice for yes or no, and given him some control in a moment when he had no control over his life." It was a real moment to think about, that even sometimes when we try and do good things, sometimes we run the risk of actually doing more harm. And I think about the possibility of how do we allow people to have as much control and choice in their lives as possible? I see this playing out in our UU congregations as well. I was talking several years ago with a UUA staffer whose son lived outside of Cleveland, Ohio. He'd gone to visit his son, and he and his son and two of his son's friends were going to watch the Cleveland play a baseball game. On their way, they drove by one of our UU congregations. Now, my son's friends and Ryan are all in their 20s. They drove by the UU congregation, West Shore, and out there they saw a huge rainbow flag, a huge Black Lives Matter flag flying. And immediately, the three 20-year-olds began to talk. They said, if I were to go to a church, that would be the kind of church I would want to go to. And when my friend was telling me this story, I thought, yes, I can hear them saying that, but what happened if they actually showed up on the church? What if they showed up wanting to make a difference in the world? They would be told they were welcome. But would the unspoken assumption be, you are welcome to be here as long as you act like the rest of the 60-year-olds here, as long as you give like the rest of the 60-year-olds here, as long as you serve on as many committees as the 60-year-olds here. We often do the same thing for people of color coming into our congregation. As long as you act like us, as long as you think like us, then we will consider you to be one of us. I still remember the story of a friend of mine, African-American UU minister. He showed up one morning in a suit, in a stole, looking a lot like I am this morning, holding a folder with his sermon, and the first thing the greeter asked him was, are you here to clean the building? I can tell you at 450 UU congregational visits, I've never been asked if I was there to be there to clean the building. And sometimes I think maybe we do eat our classmates. Maybe we don't take that moment to think about how we truly welcome someone to be who they are and not who we think we are. I kind of think as we move beyond and through this pandemic, this could actually be a golden age for Unitarian Universalism. That so many people will be looking for a faith that doesn't have one answer, that allows people to seek, allows people of all identities to show up and be who they are. Reach out to those who need us, or will simply circle the wagons and only look for people who are exactly like us. I worry about those congregations that simply circle the wagons and wonder, do they need a minister, or do they simply need a hospice chaplain? Because as religion changes, we will need to change, and we will find out what people need as we move forward. The Nigerian author Chimamanda Adichie talks about the danger of the single story. And she says, the single story creates stereotypes. And the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story the only story. We talked about this both Thursday and Monday in the Beyond Categorical Thinking workshop. Thank you to those of you who were there. Please talk to someone who was there if you weren't able to attend. And I wonder, will we allow ourselves to be more than a single story? Will we allow others to be more than a single story? Or will we commit those little acts of violence and harm and make one story our only story? In these trying and difficult times, how do we unclench? How do we do no harm? How do we pay attention? How do we sanctify existence? How will we be religious? How will we live our religion. I was thinking of my dean again from my seminary, who told me the story one time of meeting with the other deans from the other seminaries close by. And he was having a conversation with one dean in this meeting, and they were very, very opposed in terms of what they believed about what kind of common solution they had to this problem. And what my dean noticed was he said, everyone else, the other deans who were in this room, were trying to make us feel better. And he finally said, you know, Jeff and I are good friends. After this meeting, even though we disagree, we will still be friends. It is more important that you hear what we believe and share what you all believe so that we can make a difference. This is the value of diversity. We can learn from each other and the different viewpoints we come from, and then move together to make a difference that will move for all of us. How can we have these conversations? Or must everyone think exactly like I think in order to be here? In fact, I think it is this diversity of thought, diversity of people, that will in fact strengthen us. A final story where I had some very conservative Christians be my teacher one day, and then I'll close. I was at this conference, it was 25 years ago, on gender, religion, and sexuality. I was there as the director of the Office of Bisexual, Gay, Lesbian, and Transgender Concerns, and there were some 40 denominations there talking about. I found myself seated next to John, who was representing the Church of Christ, and Mark, who was representing the Church of God. And of course, being 1996, there was not the technology there was there. There was one microphone that we passed around to one another. And John goes first, and he says, to introduce himself, "Hi, my name is John. I'm here from the Church of Christ, and we are to the right of the right." And people laugh. He hands the microphone to me with a smile, and I go, "Hi, my name is the Reverend Keith Kron. I'm the director of the Office of Bisexual, Gay, Lesbian, and Transgender Concerns for the Unitarian Universalist Association," at which point I had to stop talking because John and Mark were scooting their chairs away from me. And I said, and we are from the left of the left. I had to toss the microphone to Mark and hear him talk. We spent 3 days, the next 3 days, talking about all things around gender, religion, and sexuality. They were amazed that we had more women in ministry than men. They were amazed at all of the work we had done toward honoring gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people. They were amazed that we were so out there in terms of being advocates for sexuality education. And we had some very good and strong conversations over 3 days. And finally, on the last day, John and Mark and 2 of their friends, probably named Matthew and Luke, come up to me and they say, "We would like to have lunch with you." And I thought, well, this will be fun. But I agreed. We were in Tennessee. This was my home state. They were from Tennessee. And we got together at lunch. And finally, Mark said, "You know, we wanted to have lunch with you because we wanted to tell you something. We wanted to tell you that we disagreed with nearly every single word you said over the last 3 days. But we also wanted to tell you that we respect you because at least you are clear about what you believe. And while your faith is not our faith, it is clearly your faith. And we have respect for that. And in that moment, they were my teachers, a reminder that we could come from different viewpoints and be together and talk to each other. And then after that, we began to talk about Tennessee football, and they were surprised that I actually knew more about football than they did. So I got to be their teacher too. But it was a moment when people could show up and just simply be there with each other and talk to each other. And I think our challenge as we move ahead, as you move into your ministerial search even deeper, as we move forward into whatever is next for religion, it is important that we as Unitarian Universalists be clear about what we believe, that we be more than a single story, that we be a place where people can build trust, that we can reach out to a world that needs us, and let us rebuild, regrow this faith after this pandemic. Let us be clear without being rigid. Let us be a place where we can all be classmates, where we can all unclench, where we can be together, and when we can be our own version of religious and human, and be people who sanctify existence.
Thank you, Reverend Keith, for the gift of your experience and most of all for the gift of your presence. We look forward to the day, may it be soon, when you can join us here in your whole being. For now, may we rise in all the ways that we do as we sing together hymn number 1017, verses 1, 2, and 4, Building a New Way. Prepare to leave this space, may we remember that we never walk out into the world alone. We are accompanied by the brave and generous ones who have gone before. We walk beside companions ready to catch us when we fall. We hold memories of dear ones in our hearts who keep us connected to our center. May this be our most important work, to remember that who we are does not end at the edge of our own skin. We may extinguish this chalice, but not the light of wisdom, not the warmth of human community and love, not the fire of justice that we carry forth into our lives. May these things be part of us until we gather as a congregation again. Thank you for sharing this morning with us. We look forward to seeing you next week. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving this week. See you soon.